Welcome back to Maths with Mrs. J. I wanted to start talking about graphs of trig functions. And yes, I am going to talk about the unit circle again, because remember, your cos of an angle is the x value, your sine of an angle is the y value on your unit circle, and tan is your sine divided by your cos, or you could think of it as your y divided by your x. We also have some special values that we've learnt. In particular for tan, it's kind of useful to know the values for pi on 4, 3 pi on 4, 5 pi on 4, etc. It's either going to be 1 or -1 at each of those points there. We also might recall, I've got these blocked out here, when cos is 0, doing sine divided by cos, you're trying to divide by 0 and you can't do it. Tan of x is not defined whenever cos of x is 0, which is at pi on 2, 3 pi on 2, 5 pi on 2, negative pi on 2, etc. Your tangent curve actually has vertical asymptotes at each of these points. As you approach from below, the function is tending towards positive infinity. As you approach from above, the function is tending towards negative infinity. Normally you would draw these as dotted lines, but unfortunately I don't have that option on this whiteboard. Your basic sine curve at 0, the y value is 0. At pi on 2, just remember, thinking about our unit circle here, at pi on 2 up here, the y value is 1. Then at pi, the y value is 0, then it's -1, etc. So we get a shape like this. Now it repeats itself every 2 pi. It has an amplitude of 1 because it goes up to 1 and down to -1. The graph of y equals cos of x is almost identical to the graph of y equals sine of x. Sine function. In fact, you could think of it as a sine function that has been shifted pi on 2 to the left. This is like your sine function here. The cos function also has an amplitude of 1 and a period of 2 pi. It repeats itself every 2 pi. You get that pattern happening. Your tan function, well, it doesn't make sense to talk about an amplitude of tan because obviously it's tending towards positive infinity and negative infinity, but it does make sense to talk about the period. It is repeating itself every pi. Now, if we think back to our unit circle, and yes, I do harp on about the unit, back to the unit circle, remember tan is positive in your first and third quadrants, and negative in your second and fourth. It does repeat itself every pi. Sine and cosine only repeat themselves every 2 pi, so you need to bear that in mind. In our next video, we're going to have a look at how the amplitude, the period, perhaps there might be a vertical and horizontal shift, how that's going to be affected by certain changes in the formula for the equation.